Senator Kaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have questions for each of these witnesses, so it may go longer than 5, but maybe I'll do 5 and hand it back to you, and we can go back and forth. Ms. Thornhill, I want to start with you on the TIP report. I think it's so important, not only for the United States, but it's sort of a global gold standard. The Trump administration, through staff reductions at state, have reduced the staff in this unit by about 70%. And that led the TIP report last year, which is supposed to be done by June 30, to be a couple months late. Now, obviously, you're not there now, and June 30 is just in a very few days, so we can't hold you to that. But I am troubled, and I don't really need you to answer this, but I'm just troubled about our ability to have the TIP report be that gold standard with a significant staff reduction. And I hope, should you get there, your commitment to the TIP report being that gold standard will lead you to ask for additional resources to comply and make that, continue the TIP report as a gold standard that can be done on a timely basis. I hope you'll do that. Here's what I want to ask about. You said in response to a question from my colleague that one of the positive things about the TIP report is that it holds the United States to the same standard as other nations. Here's a concern that I have that I've expressed in this committee before, and it deals with Operation Southern Spear, which is the operation to strike boats in the eastern Pacific and Caribbean near and around Ecuador and Venezuela. We had Secretary Rubio here within the last couple of weeks, and I asked him these questions. Much of the operation, and what I know about it, is classified, so I really can't describe it. And one of the things I'm not allowed to describe is the targeting criteria used to decide which boats to strike. But I can talk about things that aren't targeting criteria. And as an Armed Services Committee member, I've been very disturbed to find that the presence of drugs on a craft is not one of the targeting criteria. It could easily have been one of the targeting criteria, but it is not one of the targeting criteria. There has been public reporting about certain of the strikes that have led Pentagon officials to say that it is at least likely that some of the victims killed in these strikes are human trafficking victims. The organizations that are designated as designated terrorist organizations on the secret list by the president include some organizations that don't only do narco-trafficking, but do human trafficking. And when a boat is struck that doesn't have any evidence of drugs aboard, but there's a lot of people on it, there is some suggestion, and public reporting would suggest that some of those killed by the U.S. military strikes are, in fact, human trafficking victims. I would like your commitment that, should you be confirmed to this position, that you would work with my office to ensure, to the best of our ability, these strikes are being carried out by the DOD, not by the Department of State. But I would like your commitment that you would work with my office to make sure that reporting, for example, the TIP report, does hold all nations to an equal standard. And if there are U.S. activities that are leading to casualties among human trafficking victims, that is something that we should get to the bottom of and be transparent about with the American public. Could you make that commitment to me?
Thank you for the question and the statement. I make the commitment that I would, with delight, work with your office and learn from your office. And also, restructuring really has nothing to do with the administration's commitment to human trafficking. I feel that the boat, I'm sorry, I'm not aware of your facts on the boats. I would have to speak with you and get back to the committee.
I'm not expecting that you're aware. This is public reporting, and it's been discussed in this committee often, but you're not there now, so this is not in your current portfolio. But the chair has heard me raise this issue before, and we do need to have a uniform standard apply to all, and I look forward to working with you on that. Mr. Hurley, in your position at Treasury, have you been involved in sanctions policy and tariff policy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were you involved in decisions with respect to the sanctioning of Brazilian Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes on July 30, 2025?
Yes, I was, sir.
Were you involved in the discussions by the administration about the imposition of tariffs against Brazil that were imposed on that same day, July 30, 2025?
I was not involved in the tariff discussion, sir, but was involved in Judge Moraes' designation.
Okay. On the same day, July 30, 2025, the Trump administration imposed IEEPA emergency tariffs against Brazil. There had been some pre-existing tariffs, but this was an additional 40% tariff, declaring it to be an economic emergency for the United States that Brazil was prosecuting former President Jair Bolsonaro. And the president said that was an economic emergency for the United States and imposed a 40% additional tariff on Brazil. Mr. Hurley was not involved in that decision, but on the same day, he was involved in a decision to sanction the Supreme Court Justice of Brazil, who my understanding of that legal system was involved in that prosecution. Mr. Hurley, tell the committee why a Brazilian Supreme Court Justice involved in a local prosecution on a political corruption case warranted the United States sanctions against him.
Well, so I think, sir, the view from the White House and at Treasury and my personal view are all in sync that Judge Moraes' behavior is reprehensible. And abuse of power against a political opponent rose to the standard required to sanction him.
Tell me other judges around the world that you sanctioned because you didn't like what they were doing within their country's domestic legal system.
It's a good question, sir. I'd have to go look at precedents on I think, in the judgment on this particular case, they say with every sanction we impose, and there's a whole variety of tests we have to go through for sanctions. And this one, if I remember correctly, it's under the State Department's Global Magnitsky Act, human rights abuses rules. And we had great confidence from my entire legal team across all of Treasury and White House counsel that this more than met the standard.
This was widely reported at the time, both the sanction and the tariff against all products from Brazil as occurring because President Bolsonaro is a friend of President Trump's. The tariffs led to a Senate resolution that I led that was a bipartisan resolution to reject the president's declaration that this prosecution was an economic emergency for the United States. And the Supreme Court later, at the end of February 2026, struck down the tariffs imposed under IEEPA on the theory that the president cannot use IEEPA to impose tariffs. But the kind of selective use of powers like sanctions or tariffs, because, wow, this figure in another country is a friend of the president's and we don't like somebody going after him, was almost unprecedented. And I don't call myself the sanctions expert, like I know every use of sanctions that we have imposed, but I've been here for 13 years and I view it as almost unprecedented. To your knowledge, have the sanctions against the justice been lifted?
Well, sir, I'd say a couple of things. First, thanks very much for the question, we spent a great deal of time examining the history of sanctions and then trying to reform our approach to them. And one of the things that I'm very proud of, I know Secretary Bessent is very proud of, is the total number of gross sanctions that we issued in the last year is a fraction of the sanctions issued by the Biden administration in the previous year. If you look on a net basis, the number of sanctions that we imposed and the sanctions that we removed, dramatically below our predecessors. Like you, I think these are very important tools that we need to use sparingly. We need to use them as precision weapons, not as carpet bombs. Our predecessors didn't do as good a job as they should have. And I think, love to talk to you at some point about some of the statistics we had on the impact we had in Iran, the impact we've had in the cartels, to use the sanctions for the highest, best use. In this particular case, sir, you're right. Not long after we had imposed the sanctions on the judge, the decision was made to remove them.
And that was welcome. That was welcome. And the issue of sanctions and how you should use them and how frequently is a really important one. If you're going to be super searching with them, sanctioning terrorists, sanctioning terrorist organizations, that's one thing. I think that was kind of the core of what sanctions were designed to do. Sanctioning a Supreme Court justice in another country who's engaged in a prosecution about a matter within the domestic politics of that country is quite unusual. But that would be something I would look forward to further dialogue.
One thing I would mention, I think there's 19,000 SDNs out there right now, and one of the big initiatives that that Secretary Bessent had me and Brad Smith, who runs OFAC, focused on, was going back to look at those 19,000 designated individuals and evaluate those designations for exactly what you've described, to make sure that there's no one who, on further review or with better judgment, we wouldn't do today, especially given what felt to us especially the previous 4 years, significant overuse.
Yeah, but again, the point I'm making is if they were overused and the goal is to narrow them, then why use them in a case such as this? But I'll just leave that question out there. Let me ask now, Mr. Burkholder, about Moldova. Very, very important country and a really important part of the world right now. Do you share the assessment of Moldovan leaders that a Russian victory in Ukraine could expose their own country to intensified Russian aggression in the future?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I believe it would, and it already has. As you know, almost 1 million refugees from Ukraine came in through Moldova. Still about 100,000 of them there now, which, of course, the United States, through UN agencies, are contributing to help out that situation. So imagine 1 million people coming across your border in a country of 2.5 million people. Right. It's certainly, in a smaller country, it has a profound impact.
And a country like that, Moldova, that has really done a good thing by being able to be open in that way to this crisis on its border. You're not there yet, but talk a little bit about the approach that you would take in interacting with the Moldovan government, should you be confirmed, to help them ward off negative effects of Russian aggression.
Well, the border, I'm talking about border and energy independence. As you know, Moldova has been reliant upon Russia for energy for some time, and they have now turned their connectivity towards the West. And it's still, gas and oil is expensive, and inflation is high. But I would certainly, with the border, I think the work the United States is doing assisting them is going a long way in this regard to help that problem. And yes, if confirmed, I would certainly encourage our continued efforts to train and supply their Border Patrol with the necessary tools to make sure that human trafficking is not coming through the border, arms are not coming through the border, drugs aren't coming through the border, and bad actors aren't coming through the border.
And I'm glad you mentioned the energy independence issue too, because I think that's an area where the U.S. can also be really helpful as they continue to turn their focus on maintaining their energy portfolio away from Russian energy. So thanks for mentioning that. Is it Norieka?
Yes,
Norieka. I'm really glad that you brought up Lithuania's super dedication to the NATO investment. One of the positive aspects of both President Trump's encouragement of NATO allies, and I would say it's also a positive of the negative influence of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, has been NATO allies dramatically increasing their investment levels. And we were at a fraction of the NATO allies meeting their Wales commitment, and now all do. And we still have a long way to go, because we've realized we need to increase the commitment. But Lithuania has been a real star. And I guess they've probably been a star because they realize more than most how dangerous Russia is on their borders. I have a picture I cherish of my son being promoted to captain on a snowy field in Lithuania in December of 2016 in the middle of a deployment with the European Reassurance Initiative. But they're very aware of the threat, and they are really strong in investment. Do you see opportunities for the U.S. and Lithuania to do co-production or do other work in the kind of defense cooperation space that can enable them to be even stronger?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Yes, I mean, it's very close relationship as I understand it, just being briefed on it from here. But yes, I think one of my goals is to deepen that relationship as much as possible, and I look forward to working with the committee to do that.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Brown, I'm not going to leave you out. I mean, I didn't want you to feel disappointed, so I'm going to ask a question of you too, and then I'll yield it back to the chair. And I thank the chair for giving me some grace on timing. In March, just a couple months back, I guess that's 3 months ago now, 3 months ago, the Associated Press reported that Equatorial Guinea, and this is a quote from the article, an authoritarian petrostate signed a secretive deal with the Trump administration and has become a transit hub for deported migrants. Now, this is part of a broader policy where the Trump administration is deciding to deport individuals not to their countries of origin, but to strike deals with countries that will allow us to send folks to them, and they'll imprison or incarcerate them for some period of time, usually later to, help them go back to their countries of origin. I'm nervous about this, and I'm nervous about this because we've had a hard time getting information from the administration about these deals, about the conditions in which people are incarcerated in these third countries, about whether there's any due process there so that somebody could show, hey, you've got the wrong person. I shouldn't have been deported. My name may be the same as a name of somebody you were looking for, but it's not me. And we have utilized in the Senate a tool called a 502B resolution to try to get information about, what are we paying the nations? How many third-party detainees are they accepting? What are the conditions in the jails or prisons where they're holding people? How long are they there? And thus far, it's been virtually impossible for us to get information about this. So I guess I'd like to, you're the career person here. Have you had any, in your work up to this point, had any participation or been engaged in discussions about these third-party transfers and the agreements under which these countries are holding deportees from the United States?
Senator, thank you for your question. I am aware that
Microphone over a little bit.
okay. I am aware that Equatorial Guinea, I guess early on, volunteered to take third country nationals to their country, and then a number have been transferred there. I think it's in the 30s or something like that. It's a relatively small number. I wasn't involved in the discussion of the agreements. I know that fell under another bureau, or falls under another bureau, but I am happy to work with this committee as we go forward in those discussions, and I know that in that regard, we want to make sure that they respect the human rights of all people.
Well, I appreciate that, and I would expect that based on your long record of service to the United States. Should you be confirmed, we'd like to have a follow-up discussion about it, because as the Oversight Committee, I think we should have some window into these agreements, the conditions under which people are held, whether they have the ability to demonstrate that maybe they're not, justifiably held. All of those conversations are important. Should you be confirmed, we'd like to follow up with you on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.